All right. So, my name is Evan Strong, and I am the founder of InTheImageClothingCompany, a company that is so much more than just a clothing company because, yes, we will have clothing. I call it minimal clothing, but really, we are all universally designed in the image of our living God, who is Jesus Christ, right? In the Image Clothing Company. But when I call it minimal clothing, I'm starting to really realize and pray through it, and we're gonna have some cool designs. We're not just gonna make it so minimal to where it's minimal, okay? But what I mean is we're not gonna have our branding on the exterior of the clothing at all, ever. It's going to be made out of, as I've always said, 100% natural materials because it meshes with the body. But before I get into that, this video I'm going to talk about why being pigeon-toed, if you've heard that term, that's a term people use for when the toes point in when people walk, why that's actually natural, universally. I'm gonna get into it, but I'm first gonna explain my prerequisites, which will allow the body to be in its natural, slight pigeon-toed position, okay? My prerequisites, being the founder of In The Image Clothing Company, these are what I've had since the beginning, are to lace your shoes with my technique, well, In The Image Clothing Company's technique, found anywhere you find In The Image Clothing Company media or information at all. That technique just allows the shoe that you're wearing, to the best of the design of that shoe, having maybe a stiff sole or a smaller toe box than the natural foot shape, to just fit like a glove on the foot, right? As it would on the hand, a glove, just to allow the functionality to be there while still, allowing protection from the shoe. And that includes just tying your shoes evenly, the outside over toward the inside. That will feel amazing once you do that. But pairing that, so it's a two-part thing, my prerequisites, pairing that with removing the tags from the tongues of your shoes up through the entirety of all the clothing you wear. And I personally, Evan Strong, have gone into great depth on every single one of those tags in all their locations and what they universally do to the human body. Because I make these claims that we shouldn't have to stretch, but I make the claim because I don't, and I did in the past, trying to just get some flexibility and mobility, and now I have more than I ever did then. I make the claim we shouldn't have to exercise or work out to work up to something because the body, being designed by our God, is designed to work. We recognize here at In The Image Clothing Company, everybody has their slight differences. You might have a deformity, you might have had a major surgery or an amputation or whatever it is, but that's okay. That's your own situation, and we recognize those things. But within that, still, the body is about the skeletal system. All the musculature of the body does is operate, pivot, and rotate, and move, hinge, and bend the skeletal system. And the body's just about a natural position, and it works out of there doing everything. I made a video called The Body Only Has One Position, and I went into it in great depth because, as I just said, the body has its natural functioning working position, and from there it'll hinge, or it'll pivot, or it'll reach, or it'll rotate. So, yes, one thing I really want to discuss is what this video is for. As I mentioned, being what people would call pigeon-toed. And like I said, if you haven't heard that term, that's a term people use for when people walk and their toes are slightly pointing in, okay? But really, I've discussed so often, I've shown within my personal body, I was barefooted on the grass, actually just right over here in that video, in just a pair of shorts and a t-shirt. I showed the natural walking human gait cycle, okay? Universal human design, these terms that I use, I always say we can't tell our bodies what to do. I can't tell mine, he can't tell his, she can't tell hers, just going for all human beings. We can't tell our bodies what to do because their response to us when we're doing something that's essentially telling them what to do even if we're not doing it consciously, right? But something like lacing our shoes to collapse our arches, something like having tags in places within clothing that's just affecting our natural alignment and balance on a vertical gravity earth, right? Our body's response to us is it getting sore, its muscles getting tense, these physical health type things that come up that really, there's usually not an actual problem. The body's just trying to work in the only way it does, and we're restricting it or not allowing it to, okay? Very, 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 very common thing to happen. So that's what we do here at In The Image Clothing Company. Being so much more than just a clothing company, we will have awesome clothing with the whole intent to just allow the body to work as it's designed. But we also, I personally, up until today, the 26th of September 2024, have made these videos I'm talking about where there's lots of modifications we can do with nothing but a pair of scissors. I've made the videos free. They're free videos. You can go in to find the free modifications. We're not trying to just sell things here. We're trying to build a community of people who just want to allow their body to stay the way it was designed, or get back to, as I have done, the way that it's designed. Because we get into patternings as we go through life, and those patternings are unnatural. You know, tying your shoes the same direction, things I've talked about all the time. Wearing clothes that have tags in the same locations that alter our breathing patterns for years and years and years. All of these things that they're universal truth. We don't talk about things here at In The Image Clothing Company that are some opinion we're trying to push. We're not trying to sell anything. We're speaking on universal truth that anybody on any part of the globe that is our earth can do within their own bodies, within their own clothing, and they'll see that it's true. We're not making claims that are just our opinions. We make very bold claims, but because they are true, okay? So, being pigeon-toed, if you have seen my video, you don't have to, but if you've seen it when I showed the natural walking human gait cycle, a natural gripped arch is something that I've shown so many times within the foot, and in many different videos. I've talked about how it requires the pelvis to be able to posteriorly tuck, to activate that core, to open the legs into internal rotation, and to have toe nails, right, to add support to the flesh of the toe to grip a natural healthy arch. And in doing that, it really puts you into internal rotation, okay? Internal rotation is like this. External rotation is like this, okay? And it's not quite that simple. I did a whole video about how, I think it's titled, There Is a Lot to Internal Rotation. It was actually right here. But yeah, I say to follow the thumbs, right? Internal rotation and external rotation at its basic, but then there's a lot that goes into it. So that's within the shoulders, within the hips, even, you know, within the ankle, but really the ankle is essentially the hip, as I talk about the wrist, or the hand even, is pretty much the shoulder. And I've gone into all this, but when you have a healthy arch in your foot, right? The foot shouldn't be just like walking like this. It should be really active and like springy, right? There's an arch naturally underneath the foot. And if you don't feel like you have an arch, you think it might be your genetics or whatever, most of that stuff is entirely untrue. If you're wearing clothing or having things go on within your shoelaces that are collapsing your arches of your feet that are naturally there, then you might think that you genetically have something called flat feet, which, I mean, very, very specific, very, very rare cases, maybe. But even then, the foot only works the way it does, universally across all humans, right? You might be shaped a little bit different size or thickness or whatever, but the skeletal system, again, right, it only works how it works. So when we have our feet, as we're walking, pointing in any kind of direction that we're not going, well, that doesn't make sense. And I've talked about this, how just because so many shoes are now coming laced so absolutely terribly, collapsing the arches of the feet. So when you tighten that lace pattern before you tie your shoe knot, it's actually, as you're cinching it up, it's actually collapsing your arches. not only just not allowing room for them, but it's physically pushing them this way rather than the lacing technique of mine, of In the Image Clothing Company, going the opposite direction, allowing for that natural arch. So if you have something being clothing, and I've talked about the tags within the tongues of the shoes, how if your arch is trying to grip and your foot will naturally come up, but then there's a slippery synthetic tag on top of that, it's like this battle where your foot doesn't want to be touching that because it's slippery and unpredictable and it's man-made material, but then your arch needs to be healthy and active to walk at the same time. So as it's trying to reject that slippery tag, the arch is like collapsing, but then it's like trying to activate, and it's like this weird fight that none of us can win. Like I said, we cannot tell our bodies what to do. Okay, so the feet only work how they work, and the foot needs to be pointing in the direction you're going. I mean, when I showed the natural walking human gait cycle, I discussed how if your foot's pointing out, your knee, being just a simple hinge joint like the elbow, is going to follow it. And so now you're walking straight. If your feet are pointing out, your knees are actually bending like the opposite side, right? So you're walking straight, but your knees are bending like this and like this and like this, okay? If your feet aren't pointed the direction you're actually going, and then you can just bend them straight and walk. So being pigeon-toed, though, is actually natural to a degree, as far as a degree of pigeon-toeing. You know, just what people call that. People just are so out of touch that they don't really know how the natural foot works, truthfully, okay? Because when you have an arch, it goes like this, right? Let's say these are your feet. Your arch goes like this, okay? These outer toes really grip the ground, and your weight should be on the outsides of the feet, right? That's how you get into good internal rotation. I did a video on how toddlers are the example, right? Because toddlers are unaltered for the most part by clothing. We all come into this world and our bodies will function and operate without being altered by any kind of like worldly thing. And then as we start putting pillows under our heads and we sleep, as we start wearing clothing that's imbalanced, our bodies get altered as we go through life, right? Shoelaces are huge, heels on the shoes, things like this. So angles of waistlines, that's just all sorts of things, you know. And I've gone over all of this stuff within their own videos. Maybe not every one of them has their own videos, but I've gone over all of these things. And again, in great depth, undisputed, universal truth, the way the body works across all humans, okay? So when you're having your feet be in a naturally gripped arch position, notice how if this were the ground and this is my right foot and it grips a natural arch, look at the way my fingers, which would be my toes, right, point from going straight to gripping and pointing slightly in, right? This side it would be gripping and pointing slightly in. So when you're walking, and you can see that if you watch my video where I showed this with my bare feet, your feet should be slightly in naturally, because that's an active, healthy, open hips position, internally rotated. And I'll walk just a little bit. I'll walk away from the camera and walk back to it. Look at my toes. Right? Very natural walking gait. I'm gonna do this a few times. I did this in the other video. I'm gonna do it a few times. Because you can notice my shoulders are in the same position. My hips are in the same position. My hips don't shift. I can be walking and I can stop. And I can stop. And my hips are level. Because it's actually just because my toes are slightly pointed in that my arches are allowed to activate. Because really, we live in a modern world, and I've talked about this so often, where people the general population, at least in like countries like where I live, the United States of America, are in a constant, chronic, until fixed state of external rotation. And I've discussed this time and time again in very great depth, and also the reasons why, which is a lot of the clothing, a lot of it's that natural radius in the hand is flat because modern things we're using. There's a lot of it, right? It's patternings that are outside of our own personal body, but usually directly on them, being clothing, right? And I've gone into it exactly why. I really have. So the point is, like, if you could see me standing right now, and how I normally stand is with my toes in. If you look at people who still live in places where they really don't wear footwear, when I say still live, I just mean when we live in first world kind of countries, some people really think that certain things are just like primitive. No. What they are is natural, right? I've talked about how all the things that we have in modern world are just man-made, and nature never leaves, but all this stuff will just decompose again. So people who don't live with modern day stuff and they don't have shoes on just about ever, and they're walking on nature and natural things, their feet will be slightly pointed in. Also, look how active I can be, just like constantly activated as far as the activation of the muscles throughout my entire body, with a good proper arch and my feet slightly pointed in. Now my posterior chain is doing all the work. Posterior meaning rear of the body. The glutes, the hamstrings, the calves, internal rotation all the way up into my back and my shoulders. Core is then active. Pelvis is slightly tucked posterior, right, to contract the core, but naturally. This can all just be the natural position, because it is the position the body would be in if we do have a natural healthy arch, if we don't have clothing altering our body's natural position. So then when I walk, again, everything stays where it does. I can just have mobility and movement, stay activated with my toes slightly naturally pointed in. So, and you can see this, you can look up people who really do still live, I use the term still, or the word still, but right, people who live in places where it's more of like a tribal place. They're actually out there like hunting for food every day, and they're gathering water, and they're a lot different than what we see here in the United States of America, but it's natural, right? The point is, that's how the foot works, is pointed in slightly, okay? So being pigeon-toed isn't the thing as far as like something different or like some term. It's actually a natural foot. Because I've discussed, there's this walking trail I talk about. I go on a 12-mile walk, 6 miles, and turn around and come back almost every day, 3 times a week maybe, like some weeks, right? And it's on concrete, or no, it's on asphalt. Just an asphalt river trail. And I pass people and I watch them walk, I watch them run. I've discussed how I have a trained eye now, being the founder of In The Image Clothing Company. I've had a lot of training, if you will, to see what seems within clothing is causing certain people's shoulders to be in a certain position, or an imbalance left to right, or whatever it is, right? Throughout the whole body. And I've always discussed, since I started making videos, how you'll see people running with their feet out. And all that means is that their arches are collapsed, and their legs are in external rotation, their pelvis is in an anteriorly rotated position, because you can't be in a natural position with your feet out. It would look like this, as silly as it looks, because the pelvis will follow. If the pelvis goes anterior, the feet will go external, okay? If the pelvis tucks in, the feet can then be natural and active. And I've shown all this a lot before, but I wanted to make a dedicated video on the term of pigeon toeing and how it's not a real thing as far as something different, and it's definitely not a problem. It's actually a natural foot. So yeah, again, no opinion of mine, no opinion of In the Image Clothing Companies. This is how the foot works. So, because again, the foot grips, and if it's gripping from these outer toes, it'll pull the arch in, right? So then you'll be walking slightly like this. I've talked about before, martial artists and gymnasts are usually the two groups of people that I like to, say we can use as a visual example. People who just, their bodies work well. But also, like I said, toddlers are the example because they're unaltered. So when you watch a toddler walk, you've probably noticed, but if not, if you ever see a toddler walk with, even if they do have shoes on, the shoe probably is, altering their foot a little bit. A lot of times baby shoes actually are pretty flat on the bottom, and a lot of times they have Velcro straps rather than laces, and those things are beneficial. But if you do watch a baby or a toddler, like when kids are first learning to walk, like on the carpet or the grass, you'll see their feet are pointing in. It's natural, okay? And I've gone into all this, and experts who really actually know will also say the same thing. So yeah, pigeon toeing is very natural, because what it does is allow, I've talked about before, I don't use the word posture, right? Because the body just has its position that it works in, and anytime we're trying to be conscious of posture, it's essentially telling our bodies what to do. And I talked about that already in this video, right? We can't do that. So the body wants to be, because again, we live on a vertical earth, we live on a globe. We have a center line because gravity's pulling us straight down. And if we weren't centered, which a lot of us aren't, I wasn't for many years, then we're either going to fall over if we're out of balance, or we'll just be using muscles, stabilizing muscles and parts of the body in ways they're not even designed to work to try to hold us up. And if we're using the body in a way it's not designed, it'll get sore, okay? Stiff. We'll feel like we need to stretch in those times and things like that. So being on an earth with gravity, the body wants to be, naturally would be, in a neutrally stacked position, right? Heads on top of the shoulders, shoulders are on top of the hips, hips are on top of the feet, and between those things, like between the shoulders and the hips, you have your core, right? A slight bend, activating your muscles. And between your hips and your feet, you have your hamstrings, your glutes, your calves, right? That glute medius is a big one. Slightly bent, activating. So we're in this neutrally stacked with a slight bend natural position. And in order to get there, you have to point your toes in a little bit. Because if I'm standing just normal, and if you've seen my videos, you know my normal stance, right? Then, yeah, my feet are like this. Just very slightly in and on the arches. Now, if I were to put my feet out, I'm gonna be standing like this, and then your traps will get tight because they're in what's called protective tension. They're just trying to hold themselves from being damaged, right? Because if something happens to you when they're in a bad position, they could get injured. And so since they're in a position they're not designed to work in, they'll stay tight, so that way at least they're resilient if something happens, anything, right? But if they get hit or pulled on or whatever, anything could happen, right? Your body needs to be in its natural, internally rotated, activated, but naturally, stacked position, like I was discussing. So that's only allowed to happen if the feet are allowed to do what they do, and that'll look like them pointing in just a little bit, okay? So being pigeon-toed, I'm actually gonna run before I close this out. I'm gonna walk backward, normal backward walking. I'm gonna run towards the camera. I've made these bold claims how running is damaging to the body, and I stand by it, okay? I do. I stand by that. But running is something the body can do. What I mean is the way that people approach running in modern day, they'll go on 10, 20, 30-mile runs, you know, even 5Ks, which is about a 3-mile-ish run. That's damaging to the body. Yes, the body can do it, but it's just impact after impact after impact after impact over and over, not just on your feet, not just on your knees, not your hips, but within your shoulder capsule, within your elbows, within your face muscles, all the discs in your spine compressing each time. I mean, your entire body, all your organs are bouncing around. Even if you got a very smooth, even, nice, what you would call good running stride, okay? I've gone over it. I stand by that. Running is damaging to the body for like extended durations, okay? The body can do it if we need to catch something or if we need to get away from something, but that's short little distances, okay? I stand by that. But I will show I will run. I'm gonna walk backward. You can watch my feet slightly pointed in, but it's going to be a reversed cycle of gait, right? Gait just meaning the way that the foot, ankle, hips, knees, whole body works naturally together to walk. I always talk about the body works as a whole, right? Everything that ever happens, the whole body's involved. So yeah, I'm gonna walk backward, and I'm gonna run toward the camera. You can watch, my feet will be slightly pointed in because my body works naturally. It's not some like, look at my body, how great I've done something. The whole point of In the Image Clothing Company is the fact that we didn't do it. Our God, Jesus Christ himself, designed our bodies. And so here at In the Image Clothing Company, we're just getting our bodies out of their patternings that worldly things have created and back to their natural functions. So when I'm showing my body as an example, it's because I've allowed it to get back to natural by taking things away, okay? Removing things from clothing and simplifying, okay? And that's what we do here. So I'm gonna walk backward and then I'm gonna run toward the camera, and it'll look like what you've probably heard, if you have heard the term, pigeon-toed, okay? But it's natural. So just watch my feet mostly. You can watch the position my pelvis is tucked into, posteriorly activating the core. It'll then open the legs into internal rotation. I've gone into a lot of this in depth, in great depth, in a lot of my other videos, and then I'll actually be just on the, people say balls of the feet, but really that's right where the toe meets the rest of the foot. And it's more just, a lot of times when we put terms on something, it gives us the wrong impression, because if you're on the balls of your feet, but you're in a constant external rotation position, then you're even going to, you see what my shoulders do. I mean, we just don't want to focus on terms as much as we want to just learn how the body is and was before altered. So just, yeah, you can watch mostly my lower body, but then you'll see my hips don't shift, my shoulders don't shift, I stay straight, my toes are pointing in that direction I'm going, but because of that natural arch, they'll be slightly in, okay? So you can just kind of like observe what's really happening through my body. I'm gonna walk backward and I'll run toward the camera. Notice nothing shifts left to right or up and down. See, so when I say running is damaging to the body, I mean, that was light, quiet strides. I'm just on the balls, again, what you would call the balls of the feet. I just mean I'm just in the position the body would work in. But, well, because when I talk about the balls of the feet and saying we don't really need to like describe it, think about walking through the kitchen at night when there's other people asleep in the house. You're trying to just get some water and be quiet just so you don't wake people up. You'll walk kind of on the outsides of your feet up toward the front part of them, right? Because it's natural. It's light because it takes less energy, and it's natural. But when we're so used to being in the position clothing puts us in, it seems like we're doing something different when really we're just being allowed to be natural at that point. So anyway, yeah, being pigeon-toed is actually just a healthy body, okay? There might be times and places where you have an excess amount of internal rotation and you're like not allowed to have external rotation, but again, very specific cases are what they are, and those things come up, right? There's always differences. I mean, like I was saying, if you have a deformity, if you've had something very specific to you, if you have some kind of like health condition that really sets you apart, then okay. But pigeon-toed isn't really a thing, okay? Not my opinion, not in the Image Clothing Company's opinion, but again, if we see how the body naturally works, it looks like that a little bit, okay? So, all right, that's what I'm gonna say on pigeon toeing, okay? Like I said, we are In The Image Clothing Company. It will always be InTheImageClothingCompany.com. As of today, just because I just founded this, very recent, the website is still under construction, but that's where you will go. Depending on when you see this, you might be able to just go there and find all the things, podcasts, discussions. We're going to have a big community spreading, whatever we can, not just our clothing that will be available on the website, right? It'll sit behind the shoulders on the tops, right at the edges. Pants will always, within our designs is what I mean, pants will always be up above the hips, slightly higher in the front than in the rear. Our designs will always incorporate those things because that just allows the body to be natural. And those will be on our website available to purchase, but we are so much more than just a clothing company, and I don't want to just try to push our products. They're going to be awesome. I mean, I'm designing them because I myself need clothing that I don't have to alter just to allow my body to be natural, and ours will be that way, okay? But also, like I said, we will have podcasts, we will have discussion groups online, and we'll have ways people can meet up together. And really the point is just to spread the information with the world that really most all of the time, the vast majority of the time, when people have physical health things going on, but even other things, mental health things and other stuff, that I've gone into some of that and we'll discuss more of it, right? But the vast majority of the time, these things are caused by the only thing that's placed directly on our physical body at all times, which is our clothing, okay? And I've gone into it, again, this is undisputed truth. You just have to have the understanding of what's going on. There is no dispute that could possibly be there from any human once you hear what we actually say here at In The Image Clothing Company. It's not a belief, it's not some kind of sales pitch, okay? Universal truth for every human, because we are all universally designed. So we're going to have a lot of that going on, meaning just a lot of discussions within our podcasts, within whatever we do talk about. We might just be discussing the gospel of Jesus Christ. And as I've stated before, anytime we do open any kind of discussion in any way, or any group we meet up with or anything, we are a company founded upon and around and centered on Jesus Christ. So any time that we have any kind of urge to not be so kind to each other, we need to try our absolute best to do that, and I trust that we can. I know that we are all sinful humans, but we need to be understanding to the best of our abilities, and really we're going to grow as a community. And what's also great is as we get our bodies back to their natural functionings and natural positionings, I've talked about this, but our lives feel lighter because we don't really know a lot of the time, but we're actually constantly fighting our clothing. If it's altering our bodies at all, it's like this physical fight to just allow our bodies to do their natural thing, okay? So I stated at the beginning, but I will say again, my name is Evan Strong. I am the founder of In The Image Clothing Company, and today is the 26th of September 2024. Let's build this community as big and as broad as we can, again, only just to allow the body to work the way that it was designed, to give all the credit to the designer himself, our living God, Jesus Christ. All right, thank you.